All right, I think I'm actually live this time. So apologies to anyone who was looking on here Wednesday. I thought I'd figured it out. I did not, but I have figured it out this time. So, all right. For those of you who don't know, presumably most of the people that that have subscribed to this channel, I'm just planning on making some digital copies of photo slides. I'm just talking a little bit while I'm doing them. Give people some content to be able to just sit and relax and listen to while all this stuff is happening while they're doing stuff. Well, don't believe anybody's here, but I'll just keep going right along anyways. And I can start talking a little bit about my day. Apologies to those who subscribe to me for specifically Tiny Tim related content. It's been a very long while since I've had access to new content of his that I'm able to upload without infringing on some copyright or another. I'm getting my third strike in terms of takedowns. Two of them already came up. I think it was the Johnny Carson show and the Laughing with Rowan and Martin. So, better safe than sorry. And I'd rather have those videos up for people to be able to watch since Justin Martell's YouTube channel was taken down however many years ago it's been. But yeah, this is something a little bit different as opposed to the Tiny Tim content. But if you feel like sticking around, stick around. And apologies in advance as well. I'm not really going to be able to see chat stuff. What with the angle of the camera. The screen is actually a bit away from where my face is, so kind of difficult to see what's going on. Let's see. I guess I could talk a little bit about what went on in my day today. Woke up abnormally early for a day that I don't have any classes or anything that I have to be at online. So got up and had a little bit of oatmeal. Oh no, I didn't have oatmeal. What the hell am I talking about? I had some English breakfast tea and what did I eat for breakfast? Man, hasn't even been a few hours and I've already forgotten. Man, I don't know why I'm kind of drawing a blank. It's kind of like being on stage. You got everything that you're ready to say, ready to talk about, and just as soon as it comes on, as soon as the camera goes on, it's just it's out, and you're frozen shut. Please, somebody who I got in contact with has confirmed that I am actually live, so glad to hear that. And apologies for the slurping this time. It's a little thing called beer. Not going to do any brand selling here, but it's cheap. Let's see. I guess I could talk a little bit about the good news that I received today. I was somewhat concerned. I only have a semester left of undergraduate studies before I'm all graduated out, with the exception of a prereq that I had to, or not a prereq, a requirement for the minor that I was participating in that is only offered spring semesters and odd years. Was a source of no end of frustration that it seemed like I wasn't going to be able to graduate in the fall, and then I was going to have to stick through spring. But that all worked itself out, and so I'll actually be able to finish up in the fall like I was hoping to, and hopefully do some similar kind of work to what it is that I'm doing right here, which is just making digital copies of physical media, physical historical media, for some professionals out there. Get myself that kind of title as opposed to amateur. And I'm certain that there's no avid archivists watching, but I'm going to be upfront when I say it may grind your gears seeing me treat these slides so amateurly, or hearing that I'm just planning on tossing them per the request of the people that I'm doing it for, but whatever. I'm not a pro. Let's see. Oh, I think I might have a little bit of dust here. So I could talk a little bit about history and what's so interesting to me about it. Some people, I'm not going to name names here for discretion's sake, but some people have looked at activities that have done like this one and asked me why. Why bother doing something like this? It certainly doesn't seem to bring much to the world. And I got to be totally honest, as a history major, there have been several occasions, especially recently and in light of very depressing elements just taking place globally. There's a lot of questioning on my part as to why do history, why be a history centric individual when you could be doing something a little bit more directly productive in the world. But I'd argue it's a fairly productive industry, fairly productive field. Something worth having people who know how to do it. Otherwise, things will get lost on the way. And I would assume that the goal of modern historians is to try and avoid what I've come to appreciate as a net loss in history. Especially recently, I was reading a article that was talking about the oldest written language that collectively global historians are aware of, and that's cuneiform script. I guess it's not really a language, it's a form of writing, a writing system that several different languages utilized over a long span of time. Believe roughly 2,000 years, I could be mistaken. So don't quote me on it. But they were talking about how prevalent cuneiform was since the 6th millennium, I believe. 4th millennium, my bad, 4th millennium. And just the sheer volume of stuff that has been written in cuneiform. I don't have the numbers right next to me. They're actually over this a ways, sitting on the bed. But yeah, so if anybody is curious, I'm certain they're not. But this is a change of scenery from the first one of these. I'm not at the dining room table anymore. I'm down in the basement. My mother's sewing some chair covers as a keeping busy kind of hobby during all this. And it's been no end of frustration to her for a lot of today. And that sewing machine can get pretty loud. So figured I'd spare us all the humming and da-da-daing and take it down to a little bit more of a quiet space. Where was I? The cuneiform. So another little prefatory note. When I get different numbers about things, this really started happening when I was learning about China and the Long March, and the Great Famine. That was really what it was. The number of people that have lived and died, or that died through the whole thing. Estimates range over a huge margin. It's anywhere between 10 and 30 million people, if I'm correct in my recollection. And I'm not entirely certain that one's saved. So let me just look back and go to this playback here. Look through the pictures I've just taken. Yes, that was saved. But Oh, I'm totally spacing out now. We were talking about, oh, so there's a margin of error between these data points that can vary quite drastically. So for myself, whenever I give people a number that I've read in one of these historical events and everything, I try to take the largest number and then the smallest end of that spectrum, add those two together, and then do that division that makes an average out of it. So it's the average estimate, an average estimate, or an estimate based on average. So with this cuneiform script and the number of pieces, all of varying lengths, but pretty long, held by museums across the world, museums and institutions. It's anywhere between, I believe it was 900,000 and 2 million, something around that. So where the average came out to 1.5 million when I wrote it down. 1.5 million pieces of this writing that are out there. And this is the oldest writing that's in existence that we're aware of. And then the percentage of it, and I couldn't believe it when I read this. I had to go and fact check it with a couple different things just to make certain that the numbers were close. The percentage of that has been translated or even looked at, that was a big element to it too, even looked at. Sometimes these museums acquire these things and they just sit in a box. They got it for the sake of getting it, and then they never bother looking. But the amount of this cuneiform that has been read, translated, and examined is something like 6.5% out of the 1.5 million average estimate pieces, which I did some minor adjustments to that, tried to like make it relative to something else. So it is like taking a roughly 350-page book and taking 20-ish random pages out of there, ripping random pages out, and then basing your understanding of this far-flung and distant past. I mean, 4000 BCE, that's 6,000 years ago, roughly. And assuming that you have a full picture, or assuming that you have a pretty full picture of the book, if you took 20 random pages out of a 350-page novel and being able to tell me what the story is. That take? Sorry, sometimes the tech on this can get kind of wonky. It did. Wow, it was a surprisingly fast save. That was astonishing to me. Just realizing how even stuff that happened so long ago, we think we know it. But do we really? Do we really? When we're operating with such a minimal amount of information from such a wealth. And I looked into the reasons for this, and they certainly inspired me to want to pursue cuneiform reading, being able to read this stuff, but that requires you to be able to read several languages that are no longer spoken, and I don't know that I have the intellectual capacity for that. Who knows? Maybe I could try a language, but I think they said that there was something like 100 cuneiform readers out there, and that there's a few too many bureaucratic elements and museum politics in place to make it quite difficult to access cuneiform records from other institutions. And it certainly isn't something that's taught on a frequent basis. So those are definitely, I don't know, unusual concerns. I'm certain that there's far more pressing things in this world to look at and examine and everything. But in the realm of history, I would feel as though this massive wealth of information that's just waiting to be tapped, that it'd be a bit more of a impetus towards finding this stuff out. And here I'm taking this Roman history class, and our teacher keeps bemoaning the state of Latin readers and being able to understand what these inscriptions say in Latin and all the loss that occurred over time. But Rome, in particular, the Empire and the Republic, just as a representation of just how powerful and influential they were. I mean, they were almost around for 1,000 years combined. As a sign of that influence, they just left such a mark on the world that we live in that it's kind of hard to not see stuff. The fact that so much has survived of their time speaks volumes as to their power and influence, and their ability to spread that stuff. And it's an influence that I feel as though it persists to this day. I mean, people are taught Latin at a college level. I was taught Latin at a middle school level. I certainly can't use any of it anymore, but there's such an impetus placed upon learning Latin and being able to understand these things, and not much of an impetus placed on this historic Middle Eastern writing form. I don't know. Maybe there'll need to be a shift in history education, and maybe there's going to be a whole wave of people that do that. Anyways, that was a bit of a diatribe. The point being that if there's this massive body of information and we've just got this little tiny perspective on it, that truly is an example of how any moment in time is certainly isn't history in the moment. It's the story. It's the story that we're living, and we don't really know the conclusion. I don't feel like characters in a story usually know how the story is going to end, and there can be surprises, twists and turns, things that seem like they come out of left field if you're living it. But when somebody is able, with enough degrees of separation, to look back on things, look back on causation, look back on structural circumstances and key figures and everything, how they came to be where they were and why things happened, how things happened, really. Then it seems far more obvious. But in the moment, there's so much information in any given moment. There's so much stuff happening in the present when you're living it out. And it's all memory and everything. But just give it a couple generations and you've had this massive amount of stuff that's just missing. It's very very much ephemera, and it doesn't even mean to be. The kinds of things that people print off like a flyer or a leaflet for an advertising company or something like that, total piece of garbage. And that ends up being, it feels like, most of humanity's records. There's a few things that survive time, and it's not always just because they're worth keeping. Oftentimes it's so circumstantial. They just so happen to persist and survive into our modern eye. A great example of that is most of our understanding of Greek philosophy or Greek philosophers' lives comes from this guy Diogenes Laertes. And he wrote a book, Lives of the Philosophers, but classical scholars and ancient Greek scholars and all that openly acknowledge he's not much of a writer. It's pretty bad stuff, and it bemoans classical historians that, and by classical I mean people who study classical civilizations in the Western world. It bemoans them that simply by circumstance, the fact that his particular almost dictionary biography or encyclopedic biography of philosophers' lives is the sole resource for so many of these people's lives. Just pains them that an amateur, his work is the stuff that survived. And these are interesting things to contemplate in the world of history and looking at historical methods and how people approach things and just thinking about history as an overview. Apologies if you hear some rustling of a door behind me. That's the cat, Pinky. I would let him in, but these slides are in a semi-precarious position. I took the liberty of dusting them yesterday so that it'd be easier to cover more slide capture as opposed to just sitting there and dusting and talking. Yeah, I'm not going to let him in because he's going to knock those over. Another little good thing that happened today. Received an email a couple days ago from the college that I go to that I had some items waiting for me on the library hold shelf, and would I be interested in having them mailed out to me? And I responded. I'd received a similar email way back when school campuses were pretty much effectively shut down for the student bodies with the transfer over to digital classes. I'd received an email from these people the day after that a whole bunch of stuff I had requested, I think it was about 12, 13 CDs, had all come in. It was like, naturally, I can't go into the library now. And I realized as I'm telling this story that it actually occurred once the library itself had physically closed to the public, as into non-staff or faculty. But that was when those things came in. It's like, of course, it's at a time when I can no longer physically come in. They offered being able to mail these things out to patrons, but I assumed, apparently quite erroneously, why would they take the time and effort to mail these things out to my girlfriend and my's apartment, even though it was only about 20 minutes away from the library, let alone once we had come back here, why on earth would they take the time to mail this stuff out to a house that's about an hour and a half away? So they sent another email asking about it. I assumed they would just take the things off the shelf. And so I sent them an email, including my address, and told them that I figured that it was a bit too far away for them to do this. I was assuming that these deliveries, these mailings, were going to be courtesy mailings to like local faculty and such. And I certainly didn't feel like the things I had requested were particularly important in the world of scholarship. They were mainly for entertainment purposes. College I go to has an extensive CD collection, and many of the CDs that they have access to are ones that are very difficult to find on Amazon or eBay even, and certainly difficult to find out if you're getting a particular edition of some things, because the way that record companies work out, sometimes they make these shoddy, very poorly produced CDs after a very high quality CD by some other company is taken off. I can't begin to talk about that. I'm very unknowledgeable. And apologies for the slight striptease here. It's just getting a little bit warm, which is odd considering I'm in a basement. Okay. Okay. Oh, might as well just toss it over the way. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I really didn't think that they were going to send these things over. But they immediately got back and they were like, we're happy to send these things over. And that was on a Wednesday, this past Wednesday. Come Thursday morning, I received an email that a package from the college is going to be showing up on Friday in the morning, so the very next day. And was waiting expectantly for it this morning, and wouldn't you know it, guy came and dropped it off at the back door, and was able to finally get my hands on some of these things. Two of them were these albums by an absolutely fantastic folk musician. If you've never heard Jim Croce, I highly recommend him. That's Croce. And I've heard very different interpretations as to how to say his name. I swear the drinking interruptions will stop shortly. There's not much left of this beer. And unfortunately, I've run out. In the grand scheme of things, this is going to be quite devastating, but what are you going to do? But yeah, two of them were first two real albums by Croce. One of them was a very limited release in its initial vinyl called Facets. And I've heard a couple songs from it. It's not the greatest work. He was definitely finding his voice and finding his style. But hey, if you really like a musician as much as I love this guy, you want to hear everything he's got. So there was that, and then the other one was from '69, I believe, and that was a duet album that he did with his newlywed at the time. She has a fantastic voice. I was wondering to myself while I was listening to it today why she didn't end up pursuing music on her own once he died. He died in his mid-30s, I think, in a plane crash in the mid-70s. And I wondered why she hadn't pursued music post that, listening to it. And my mother brought up a very good point that maybe it wasn't fun to her after he had died, and that maybe it was the reason that she felt compelled to do it. The duet album was because she enjoyed making music with him. And seemed like a very reasonable explanation to myself. His son makes a lot of music, but I can't say that the little I've heard was particularly up my alley. Yeah, so that came. I had a whole bunch of Frank Zappa albums, specifically a lot of his instrumental ones. Unfortunately, one of them would not go into my iTunes for some reason, so boo-hoo on that. But I grabbed the one that didn't work was the Grand Wazoo. Who knows? I'll find a way around that. I guess there was a Grand Wazoo Waka Jawaka, which, what a title. And then it was initially supposed to be a 4 LP album as a way to get out of his 4 remaining record contract that he had. I think it was with Warner Brothers. I could be mistaken. So he tried to give them like a 4 LP record, and they were like, "We refuse to release this way. You're gonna have to like mix these and divide them into 4 albums." And he was like, "No way." So they went ahead and did it without him, much to his chagrin. So what he did was he took a test pressing of the original, and he took it to a radio station that year that it was supposed to come out, and they played it. And before the album, he sent out a message to everybody encouraging them to illegally tape it, make copies of it. And so, at least according to Wikipedia, the bootlegs were quite widespread in their circulation until they made an official release, until his estate made an official release of the original album as it was intended, as opposed to 4 separate albums. So it'll be interesting to listen to. I've heard it a lot of it actually. I can't be modest about that. I listened to a lot of it on YouTube, and the excerpts that they had in this particular playlist on YouTube was I'm just having an epiphany here, just having a memory fart as to whether or not I had done a in-between capture to distinguish between slide cartridges. If I don't do that, it becomes quite a challenge differentiating between them, but I did. So, phew. Yeah, so they were all the tracks from Leather, which is the name of the album, spelled L-A with an umlaut, T-H-E-R, creative way of spelling that. Yeah, it was pretty good stuff. I'm a big fan of his instrumental pieces. I'm not a huge fan of the pieces that involve singing. He's a bit dry for me in terms of his humor. And totally respect that. Everyone's entitled to their own opinions, their own lifestyle choices, and everything, as long as they don't hurt people that aren't privy to that. But just not really my cup of tea. Last night, I was listening a little bit to another guy that I'm a big fan of, Dan Fogelberg. I only had a couple albums of his, and that was a couple of years ago. But at this point, I only have one of those ones, which are from his early career in the 70s. But I was listening to his greatest hits album from '82, which really did pull together like some of the best songs of his. Sometimes they're very obviously filler on an album, as opposed to, I don't know, crafted music. Yeah, listen to the greatest hits one. It was pretty good. And then listen to, I can't remember what it's called, like Snowy Mountain Roads or something. And it so captures a feeling I have about a place I've never even been, which is Montana, kind of this upper Midwest region with the cool looking zigzaggy sweaters, lots of snow, which over time is just not going to be there. But hang on just one second. Apologies for the interruption. Chatting. Somebody just asked me a question. Good old friend asking if I doing a little streaming today, and I am. Spacing out. Yeah, so it just captures this whole world for me that if you've ever seen any of what was that show called? Something from the 90s. Oh, my mom had this great sweater. I really hope she still has it. It was from the show, or made reference to the show. Ah, man. Northern Exposure. That was what it was. She had a Northern Exposure sweater with a moose on it. Oh. Makes me think of a time and a place that are clearly not a part of my childhood, and yet they're there in my brain. And so Dan, on the cover of this, Dan Fogelberg was just really like nailing that look. Hey, Fotogen. For those not in the know, I can see, maybe there's one other person. For all people's not in the know, Fotogen's a good friend. Check out their videos. If I can do some shameless promotion here. Let's see. Oh, and he had this great song on that album about I think his name's Jakob Sutter, John Sutter. He's the guy who is responsible unintentionally or intentionally for the California Gold Rush, the first one. He was like a Swiss German immigrant, and I only know anything about him because of a very odd story about a Nazi-produced film that was shot in America. It was all about Jacob Sutter. And it is a great visual example, the odd place that Native Americans held in Nazi Germany, and Germany at large, honestly, not even just the Nazis, but Germany's fascination with Native Americans. They actually had some Sioux Nation people in the film, so that they could show just what a strong bond and relationship they had with the German people. Not that historically there's been a particularly strong direct relation between those groups of people. I think there was a group in Texas, but I could be mistaken on that. But yeah, that film was really hard to find. I managed to find a single copy of it on the interlibrary loan system in the state that I live in. Yeah, it was like an international film version of a VHS tape, because it clearly never got a DVD release here in the States. No subtitles, so kind of made the German element to it really hard to understand, though it looked like a pretty bad film. Pretty typical of that time period, very schlocky, playing off of emotion a lot. But that clip with the Native Americans was pretty interesting. Let's see. Let's talk about Dan Fogelberg. Talked about Jim Croce. What else could we talk about? I showed my mother a movie last night called It Comes at Night. She's not a huge fan. But I got to be totally honest, I wasn't the most enthused about it upon watching it outside of the theater. Theater experience really does make and break some movies, or just adds a elevation to some movie status that it just does not deserve. What movie? So the one that I'm talking about is It Comes at Night. It was an A24 film. Came out a couple of years ago. Went and saw it with my girlfriend and her eldest brother, and he was really not a fan right from the get-go. In the theater, though, my girlfriend and I absolutely loved it. I just thought it was a very well done film. And I can kind of see the criticisms my mother had of it. But I was thinking that I would show her, one of her complaints about it was that she didn't find it creepy or like a horror film, which it's marketed as a horror film, but it really isn't. More of a drama. And then I was like, oh, you want creepy? Which her answer in reality is no. She's not a huge horror film person. Had a pretty bad experience with horror films in her childhood. But I was like, you want a horror movie? We could watch It Follows. Because she thought that this movie was actually that one, because I had talked to her about it when I went to go see that in theaters for the first time. What an experience that was. I went to go see the movie completely blind. If you're familiar with it, it's like a pretty excellent homage to like these 80s style kind of like slasher films. I don't know, in tone. So it's in this weird like non-time. Like it's kind of the future, but it's kind of not. Just weird tech that's like incredibly inconsequential to the story. But I went to go see the movie because my girlfriend at the time, Amanda, she told me that her aunt was in it. I was like, oh, your aunt's in a movie? Well, I'll go check it out. So I got off work, and there was a movie theater just not even like 10 minutes away from my job. I believe it was a work day. And I took my sister with me, and we went to go see this film. and I knew it was rated R, but I didn't know it was a horror film. I knew absolutely nothing about it other than the name, and even then, I should have been able to glean from it, from the name, that it was like going to be a scary movie as opposed to just whatever. So going completely blind, it opens on a very iconic scene. At least people who've seen the film, I think. It was like, oh, this is going to be a scary movie. Well, it's not too scary. I'm not too worried about this. And there were only like 5 people in the theater. This was like the night that it came out. I couldn't believe the small attendance, but I assumed it was an indie film. The theater that I went to in our local, there's many downtowns around here, but this particular downtown is kind of dedicated to art films, which I usually interpreted to be bad films, at least in my previous experience there. But man, oh man, as time went on, I did see her aunt for all the 2 scenes she was in. I was engrossed by that movie. So many of the shots were, it turned out they were local shots, they were local locations. I wondered why everything seemed so familiar when they were walking around places or doing things. And the whole time I was like, oh, this is a great movie, but it's not scary. And then my sister and I drove back home. We got back there and it was pitch black outside, and I just remember having the hardest time going to sleep. There's just something about this feeling that there's this gradual, slow thing out there pursuing you, and you would potentially not even know. The music was just superb. That really made the movie. I think any other score would have made it an okay movie, but not nearly as gripping. And I think the guy, I could be mistaken, I think the guy went on to do like a whole bunch of sort of like retro 80s style soundtracks, since that's the mode of the day, is these retro 80s style scores. Look at that, we're done with the whole set already, and it's not even an hour. Yeah, if you've never seen it, highly recommend it. Mom was up to the challenge, so we're probably going to watch that tonight. I'm looking forward to spooking her. Just sounds like a mean thing to say, but hey. Well, thank you, Fadigan. And that is the bear. There we go. I got to be totally honest, I may take a brief break and run away just to grab some water. I can't recall whether or not beer dehydrates you, but I think it does. Call you Photo. Okay, I'll call you Photolol. Let's see. What are we talking about now? You got any suggestions, Photo? What should I talk about? Nothing. You got nothing for me. Let's talk about silence. No, I'm kidding. How can you talk about silence by not saying anything? Let's see. Talk a little bit about something else that I'm hoping to show my mother. It's an anime called Princess Tutu, and is that a sublime anime? The Sound of Silence. You want me to talk about Simon and Garfunkel? Okay. Gotta be totally honest, I'm not a huge Simon and Garfunkel guy, which is odd considering how enamored I am with folk music. And I feel like they're pretty, yeah, sorry, Photolol. They're pretty like critical folk music individuals. The soundtrack that they did for The Graduate is absolutely superb. Like that one is on point, and it works well in the movie. Again, another one of those soundtracks that, like, without it, I don't know that the movie visually it would be quite striking, but that just like really nails it in. But I've never really been compelled to listen to them outside of being made to listen to them through a film. Yeah, I listened to a couple of Paul Simon albums. It was really on the suggestion of a girl I was interested in many years ago at this point. But yeah, she said that Paul Simon was one of her faves, specifically Graceland, which was an album I'd never heard of before. And it was interesting. Maybe it was particularly that duo that really carried a lot of weight. Yeah, I don't know. There's a couple classical artists that are like that. Couple musicians that I know that they're good, and I've heard their music, and I know it's good. And I remember this being an argument that I used to make for people who they were like, "Why do you listen to these people that nobody's ever heard of before? It kind of alienates you from other people." Tiny Tim's a great example. Why do you listen to Tiny Tim? That was a question that I got a lot. It's like you could be listening to people that like everybody knows are good, and like you could have conversations with them about these people. It's like my issue, at least at the time, and a little bit now, is like everybody knows they're good. Everybody knows they're good already. So what is one more voice coming in and listening to that? At least when I was young, I am young. I'm going to tell myself that until I'm 90. When you're young and you're exploring music, why explore the ones that people could tell you are just objectively like popular, objectively good? Just like the classic, like Citizen Kane in terms of music. Like everyone's like, oh, it's just the thing. It's the thing. It's just the best. And I'm certain that in some way, it's something you could really take in and appreciate and be like, wow, yeah, this is pretty good. But do that in due time. Do that once you're past your desire to explore, your desire to go out there into like a given media and go out and just check out anything and everything you possibly can. I used to have this huge CD collection. Probably wasted so much money on that as a teenager. But it was all in this pursuit, just checking out like people who I couldn't find if I didn't buy the CD, like it wasn't online, stuff that wasn't readily available to check out. And a lot of it sucked upon revision and coming back to it and listening to it again and going like, wow, I can't believe I bought this. There was some stuff that was just absolute like critical gems. Sitting here looking around the room right now because I thought I had an example you guys would enjoy looking at. But I don't see it. So I don't know where I put it. Naturally, the minute my brain goes away from this thing, I can't tell whether or not I captured the image. I don't think I did. It's a pretty old-fashioned style thing, lots of clicking buttons and stuff like that. But hey, it's pretty fancy or snazzy for me. And it was relatively inexpensive at the time, and in one particular instance actually did bring me a return. When I'd been suggested by my mother to try and pursue digitizing projects for other individuals aside from myself and people that I knew closely to make digitizing a private enterprise of mine through which I could make some side cash, some side income. But I never really felt the drive to do that. Feel as though people who aren't privy to processes like these, especially amateur ones with very minimal equipment, don't realize the sheer amount of time it takes to get these things done. This particular machine can do a whole variety of things, not just photo slides, though that is certainly the most common thing that I've done. One of the things it can do is take pictures and scale the pictures to film, like real footage. And there were 2 sets of real footage that in my family, we had a whole bunch of real footage. If we want to talk about history and we want to talk about history loss, there's a real history loss in our family. On my father's side, my grandfather moved to Arizona after both my father and my grandmother passed away. He felt as though the house that he had lived in, both of those people had lived there with him for an extended period of time, very long time, since like the early 60s, mid 60s, my bad. And felt like it was time for a change of scenery, and they had a house out in Arizona. Incredibly bougie, I know. But decided to go move out there to get away from all that malaise in that house, and I totally understand it. That's a conversation for another time. But he had a box, this huge box. It was probably, I'm putting the arms right. Yeah, it was probably about a little bit under this size, about that deep, that deep, very big box with tons and tons of slides, tons and tons of footage, lots of real footage, like 8mm. It spanned a huge chunk of time from like the 60s, maybe even the late 50s into the 80s. And he did an estate sale at the house. And as soon as I say that, I feel like you probably know where that story ends. The box was accidentally sold in the estate sale because these people were a third party. They didn't know that it was valuable to all of us. Super tough. It was very tough on him. He felt like it was a major slip up on his part, that all of this family history had just been up and lost in like moments. Sold to a film teacher at some college. Unfortunately, the people who sold it to her, they couldn't recall what college it was. And she bought it so that she could teach her students how to splice and edit film. At the very least, it did help people in their education, but I'll be damned if that wasn't a major disappointment to myself, let alone my grandfather. But yeah, there was a huge loss. But some of the footage on my mother's side, we had some pre-1947, so mid-1940s. It might have even been during World War II. Footage of my grandmother's first husband, and he was a missionary to Ecuador, and he must have taken like a portable camera with him. I think a couple of shots in the film, you can actually see a friend of his holding one of these little tiny portable film cameras. And they went out while they were on one of their missions out to Ecuador during the 1940s, and just filmed. They just filmed life out there and everything. And that one had never been digitized because of the odd format. It was a little bit smaller than 35mm, but 35mm is a standard size, and I think 16 is a standard size as well. Certainly 8 is, but it was between these standard sizes. It didn't really fit. You could tell that it was of a special old type of film. I think it might be something like silver nitrate, which I know is highly flammable, so don't worry. I'm certain you're not worrying, but I definitely didn't put it near anything that was going to catch that on fire. But I resolved to make a digital copy of these reels because my grandmother's first husband was a very kind and loving man. Of course, if he hadn't been out of the picture, my grandfather wouldn't have been in the picture. Subsequently, I wouldn't exist. But he was a very nice individual, very kind individual, and he died in a plane crash. He operated a small biplane. He was also like he broke horses for fun on ranches and stuff like that. I think it was out in Nebraska. I could be mistaken. But he didn't have any immediate family after he died. It was his mother and his father, and they were getting kind of old. So when he died, that kind of just ended that whole family, really. So I don't know. It was that coupled with curiosity that prompted me to film or to transfer that real footage onto this thing, which involved using one of these things that's a little bit narrower in the middle that can clasp onto the reel, and then you feed the reel frame by frame and you take a picture. It'd be nice if there was a way to like film it going through the picture, but I don't know that there's technology capable of that quite yet. Suffice it to say, when I did that, it was a couple years ago, it took so long, and the thing was stuck in here because you had to stick it in. If you were pulling the reel off the spindle and you were pulling it along this thing, you just had this like loose film on this one end, and then you had all this stuff left to be done. And they're individual frames. It's like almost a second, probably less than a second a frame. It took a really long time. The one reel, if I ever get a chance next Wednesday, I'll show you. It was like not too big. It was like that big in terms of footage that was on it. It really doesn't seem like that'd be a whole lot of film. And yet it took me, I think, about 36 hours solid of taking pictures off of that thing. Thankfully, I was house sitting for somebody and I didn't have much to do, wasting my youth away, just taking pictures. Then the other one, which was a bigger one, that took, I think, a little under a week. It took like a solid five days worth of time to be able to digitize that whole thing. And naturally, when you take thousands and thousands of pictures, I think it was something around the realm, the larger one, it was something around the realm of like 10,000 photos. When you take 10,000 photos and you try to compress them so that they move as though it's motion, trying to get it to work like a film again, there was a lot, at least the software I was using, there was a lot of compression. So it didn't turn out quite like it looked. Like the images were pretty damn clear for having been in a canister for, geez, almost what, 60 years for 1940. So 75 years, a little under 80 years. It looked pretty good, but because of the compression, it got pretty blurry, and it looked very much like the kind of thing you'd see on the History Channel in the 90s, early 2000s, that kind of thing. You saw footage. I did hang on to that, unlike these slides, because the slides come out pretty clear. They come out pretty damn good, about as good as they're going to get. But yeah, so I never really did much slide or film stuff for other people. I vowed never to do the film stuff again, even though I have a couple more reels of film from my mother's side of the family, just because it's so time consuming, especially 8mm film, these little tiny pictures. You're just taking like thousands and thousands of pictures all to get like a low res video. I'd rather spend the money that I have spent on a couple of these real films, just have some professional group of people do it. It's stupidly expensive. But if they're doing it shot by shot, I think it's a totally valid expense if they're doing the same thing that I'm doing, but at a larger scale. Yeah, I'm never going to do that. So I did do slides for a person, and she was part of I can't remember what exactly they were called. I think it's Sky Meditation. My mother knew this woman who was involved in one of these meditative groups that are guru-led. So they've got a guy who is from India, and he's their spiritual teacher and all that. They follow him and all that. And I went to a couple meetings with my mother, but both she and I, it didn't resonate. But the woman, Denise, she was absolutely fantastic. She's a great person and a very nice and caring individual. And she's reached out a couple times. I don't recall off the top of my head if I had the grace to respond back. But hey, the virtue is on them, not me. So people look back at me and see what a jerk I was. Yeah, she had a whole bunch of slides from her parents and was more than happy to do a digitizing project for her. It certainly wasn't to the extent that this particular project is at. This, again, for those who weren't present to the first video I did of this, I was going to do it on YouTube. It ended up having to be on Instagram. Little did I know there was just this little tiny button. All I had to do was click that damn button, and I would have been on here. But as I mentioned in that one, I'm in the midst. I'm a little more than halfway at this point through digitizing 80 some cartridges, a little under 78 cartridges of 100 slides each cartridge for my girlfriend's family. And these ones go back a little before World War II into the 1990s. So only a span of 50 years, and yet they got a little under 8,000 photos. It's just it's very crazy to contemplate the volume of that. I was trying to think of like how much time, try to calculate how much time it would take if I went through these pictures with my girlfriend's mother. If we went and looked at each picture for a second, literally a second, which is like barely enough time for her to be able to tell me what's on the shot. If we tried to do that, it would have taken us something like 3 solid months time-wise, which would translate probably to like 9 months. Because assuming that you're not doing like an 8-hour shift of looking at pictures, and who the hell would do that? Would have taken something like 9 months to be able to look at every single picture and identify it. Thankfully, for myself at least, I know that this is part of the whole data loss thing I was just talking about with history. There's a whole bunch of them that are in very bad focus, so they're not even worth keeping. And I've looked at a couple of these cartridges with my girlfriend's mom, and she's been very quick to be like, don't keep this one, don't keep this one. And there's a hoarding rat part of my body. Underneath this shirt somewhere, there's a rat squirming around inside my skin, which is a great soundbite to just take out of context. But it's the pack rat that really wants to hang on to everything, even the bad stuff, the stuff that's not worth it, like old photos from the 40s and 50s. You can't even tell what's in it because it's out of focus. But thankfully, there's other people to help me push past that and be like, no, yeah, definitely not worth keeping. I've certainly been able to do that at times in my life. So I'm a pack rat with bouts of purging. So maybe I'm more of a bulimic rat. Let's see. Yeah, this has been quite a project. And it's been pretty amazing seeing just the decades really roll by in a first-hand way, like seeing people just taking pictures of their day-to-day lives, and then you kind of just notice things in a way that you can't in your own life. I'm trying to remember what it was called in the ISB class that I'm taking. I like the analogy. I'm uncertain what analogy, but I'm glad. I'm glad that something clicked or something was good. instead of just loads and loads of sewage that I'm just wading through. Oh crap, I lost my train of thought. Well, we can come up with something else. Who knows, maybe it'll come back. Oh no, yeah, the gradual effect of time. In this ISB class that I was taking, or am taking, there was something we talked about when it comes to like not being able as an individual to appreciate. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Glad to hear somebody is. I am as well. That generations, like a generation, like 3 generations ago, was a totally different life, totally different climate and world than the world that we live in. 3 generations ago for myself, let's see, that's my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. My great-grandparents lived through the Depression. And they lived through the First World War. They lived through the Second World War. And these are things, all of those things are things that I simply cannot fathom. Like, I can read about them, and I have an understanding of them, but it's not the same as living it. So subsequently, I'm not as, that's the little doggy upstairs. Somebody must be agitating him. We may have that as a backing percussive track for a second here. He's a bit irregular, so it's kind of hard to like make an impromptu hip hop track here. So sorry about that. Man, his dulcet tones are distracting me. Ooh, you know what we could talk about? Something that I thought was really eerie that I read yesterday. Now, this is a warning about this story, a little disclosure. My apologies. I keep doing this, and it's just because I keep looking at the camera and my fingers are delayed. I will go down Wikipedia rabbit holes like crazy. I was talking with my girlfriend about, or my girlfriend's mom about contributing to Wikipedia, and that I do it on a semi-consistent basis, and it's usually a decent amount of money in contrast to what they're asking for. They're usually asking for like $5, and I'll usually throw like 20 or 30 bucks at them. Who knows? Maybe the responsible thing is to do like a subscription donation to these people, especially because I use that system all the time. Especially as time is going by, it's really hard for people to like maliciously edit. And you can always fact check the sources that you've got there. I'm not doing great when it comes to remembering if I took these pictures this time. But what the hell was I talking about? God damn. If I needed any proof of early onset dementia, well, maybe dementia is the wrong thing. Early onset memory loss. This will be my archive. Incapable of remembering things from seconds ago. We're talking about Wikipedia. I use it all the time, daily basis. I kid you not, daily basis, and I usually spend about 20-30 minutes on there. I used to think I spent an excessive amount of time on YouTube just watching random videos and stuff. Definitely, I spend way more time on Wikipedia, just reading stuff. And if something is particularly fascinating, going and checking the source on it. But I was reading about I can't call them ancestors because this is something I learned that was a recent learn that I think is interesting for all us Scots out there or people of Scottish descent. last names like McDonald or McGregor or Wallace, all these other kinds of names that are clan names, it doesn't mean, and I used to think this, I thought this until like today, it does not mean that your ancestors can be traced back to some legendary clan leader. And all of them, all these clans have legendary leaders, like truly mythological kind of beings and stuff like that from about 1,000 years ago. The key to it, and the reason that we have those names, is because the majority of us who don't have any lineage to those people are ancestors of those people's subjects. And the people who were subject to certain chiefs would take on the name of their chief as a sign of fealty. So in all honesty, like a McGregor, a Wallace, a Bruce, they take that name because they probably didn't even have a last name. Like, especially 1,000 years ago, there wasn't much of a point in having a last name if you were like a peasant or a working class serf. But anywho, I was reading about the royal lineages and all that kind of stuff, because people love that kind of thing. And my grandfather's father, so my great grandfather, had a couple of buddies in the Glasgow Police Department that were amateur genealogists, and they wrote him a letter apparently in the late 30s, early 40s. I'm assuming late 30s and early 40s because the last living chief of my great grandfather's namesake, Crawford, he died in 1942, and at the time of the letter, he was still alive. So it had to have been the early 40s or the late 30s, which would make it like the only letter that I have from the 30s. But anywho, they were writing about these people, and they kept bringing up a guy who I'd heard of before, Robert the Bruce, was considered like a Scottish national hero. He won the first war of independence against England. And so I just looked him up, get a little like historical context again, refresh my memory a bit on him. And I saw that they had done facial reconstructions of him. I was like, how did they do facial reconstructions of this guy? Like, he lived almost 1,000 years ago. How's that possible? And it turns out in like the early 19th century, listen to me mansplaining here. Early 19th century, they discovered his tomb on accident in a abbey. They found this massive lead coffin, which got me wondering why they bury people in lead. Apparently, it preserves your body a little bit. But it wasn't just a coffin that was made of lead. When they opened it, they found like a human body that had been wrapped in sheets of lead. So like he had been bound into this thing, like a suit made out of lead, which is just crazy imagery to think of. And I'm getting so distracted with my own rambling, getting these pictures again. But he was like bound in this suit of lead, and they pulled it apart. They didn't know who it was, but like I think within a year they like closed off the thing until they could identify who it was. They closed the whole abbey off for like a year or whatever it was until they could identify the individual. They came to the conclusion it was Robert the Bruce. And unfortunately, within that year, or within the 6 months or something that they had the abbey closed off, already his exposure to the elements had started deteriorating elements to his body. Not that there was much that had survived. They talked about that it was just bones inside the lead. And that's happened a whole bunch of times when they find bodies that were supposed to be preserved through different methods. I know that there have been a couple, I think it was emperors in China, in Chinese history, that were bound in suits of jade, because they felt like it immortalized your body underneath. And yet, when they go to pull the jade suit off, the body's not in there anymore. It's just dust from the bones. But I will actually be right back, and I will continue this story. I have to use the restroom. So stay tuned for more. Cardinal sin for a future history teacher to do something like that. I had it happen in a class once. But I can talk about that after this interesting stuff about Robert the Bruce and what rabbit hole that led me down into. So they figured out who it was. The body was getting pretty badly damaged. What bones had remained inside of there, but they felt that they needed to give it give his corpse an honorable reburial, and so, oh yay, okay. They let people look at him, and apparently when they were doing this like procession of people looking at him, again, this is like the early 19th century, so it's not that long ago. Just completely no taste on the part of these people. Parts of his body were stolen, like pieces of his fingers and his toes. And one of the things that was able to help them identify who it was that he had this huge crack down the middle of his rib cage. And it was because when Robert the Bruce was killed, or when he died, they cracked his chest open to pull out his heart and preserve it. I'm not entirely certain what the point of that was, but he was seen in quite a high light even in his own time. I feel as though it was seen as auspicious to do so. But they made a cast of his skull before they reburied him. And it's a pretty interesting looking skull and stuff like that. But that was how they were able to do the facial reconstruction, was his skull. And then it led me down a path of reading about facial reconstruction, which it turns out is very infrequently used in history and anthropology and that kind of thing. that's where we always see it in stuff like National Geographic or like that weird documentary about Richard III. Um, but it's most often used in forensics to identify corpses that they don't know who the person is because they don't have any ID on them. And then it took me to this list on Wikipedia that they had of crimes where they have either a photograph or a reconstruction of the person's face that they have posted publicly and that have never been identified. And some of these go back to like the 70s in the United States. So I was looking at pictures of these people and it's like, just looks like a regular person. How does nobody know who this is? Like, presumably they don't have the most widest of ways of like distributing this photo to be like, hey, have you seen this person? And clearly the right people to identify them are just not seeing these things or choosing not to speak on them. It was eerie. It was eerie reading about that and thinking to myself, like, geez, you could get killed out there. Not that that's likely to happen. You could get killed out there and then just never be identified. And you could be just a total nobody. They had a guy on there. I thought this was so weird and fascinating. From the 1940s in Australia, in Adelaide. And they had a picture of him, and his body was like remarkably intact. Like he just kind of looked like he was sleeping in the picture. And he's never been identified. He was wearing a suit and everything, never been identified. I have no clue who this guy is. Which makes me think, in an amateur, as though I know what the hell I'm talking about kind of way, like he must have been some sort of like Secret Service-y guy for Australia's government or something. And it's just like, it's not that nobody knew, it's that nobody was going to talk about who this guy was. Let's see. No, yeah. So I had a professor a couple of years ago now, and he did a pretty good job, like carrying through some pretty like emotive energy through his lecture. It was an early morning lecture, and it was a history one, no less. So half the people in the class are like ready to fall asleep. I never understand those people. Why even bother with the class, even if it's a requirement? I'd I don't know, drink an espresso or just take a couple shots of instant coffee, sludge, just like snort that sludge and everything, just to like really jolt yourself awake. Because history is a dense thing to begin with. When some people teach it, made all the more dense if you're not even awake. And it was a winter semester too, so the sun wasn't even out, so it's almost like it's nighttime, like you should be sleeping. They did a real good job, like trying to carry the class and keep it up and peppy and vibing and all that. And then there was one time where he was working himself up into a frenzy. He was like getting real impassioned about U.S. history and about the issue of slavery in the United States and just how disinterested free soilers were and stuff like that. They were really more interested in like the land aspect of it, less to do with the ethics of it. And then he like had this interjected pause, and he was like, "I have to go to the bathroom," and then just like bolted out of there. And he said that he had never done that in class before. It was like amazing, amazing, really, just because how uncommon it is. I don't know that I've ever had a professor, and I've been going to college on and off for a while. I don't know that I ever had a professor before and never since have to use the restroom in the middle of class without like calling a break or something. But yeah, he was a great guy. He is a great guy. Let's see. Trying to think of what else we could talk about. Photogen, that gave me a pretty good like round of tangents. Man, my language has not been on point recently. I think it's because I've like reduced my amount of communication with people other than my family. It's making it quite difficult to recall what words are and how they sound. But yeah, Photogun, give me something. What should I talk about? Even just throw a word, just a word, some concept or something like that. And meanwhile, I will talk about something I know absolutely nothing about, but tons of people are engaged in and involved with. And it makes me happy that it came out at this time, and that's Animal Crossing. There's this new Animal Crossing game that just came out, and it's a franchise I'm very unfamiliar with. Very unfamiliar. What the hell am I talking about? Probably name a couple characters, like Mr. Rossetti, KK Slider, and that's a good one. Tom Nook. There. And Isabelle. Yeah. So there's your characters. But how fantastic it is that this game that's very light and kind of wholesome has a little bit of an online thing I've heard. I don't know that it has like a large amount of online capabilities for people to socialize, but enough. Yeah, Isabella. I don't do much Animal Crossing, but I do Mario Kart, and Isabella is a frequent avatar of choice in Mario Kart, especially online, because nothing quite makes a victory as sweet as winning it with Isabella. Yeah, let's talk about parallel universes. This is actually a really interesting topic in the world of like causation, or no, not causation, in history, with this concept of counterfactuals, which are like, they are alternate universes. It's what if something didn't happen, or what if this happened instead? What would the world be like? And one of the books that we had to read for that class with the prof who had to go to the bathroom during lecture, which is going to be his name forever, Prof who had to pee. So Prof who had to pee had a book for us to read that was all about a counterfactual in the Civil War, and how even changing one of these battles that was considered seminal to Union victory, even changing it so that by some freak accident or act of nature, that the Confederacy was able to win. He talked about in the book and tried to convey, and I feel as though quite accurately, for myself at least, how it's an interesting thought exercise, the what ifs in human history, but so many things. There's so many elements that go into every single event and every single person being the way that they are, that are like the movers in history, that it's really hard. Like, there'd have to be a whole set of things, or some really subtle base level change that moves on to something big. And I think they nailed it in this book. I'm trying to remember what it was called. It was like the Fourth Battle of Winchester or something. It was dry, not gonna lie, super dry, and in that respect, not good reading. But it brought up interesting thoughts and conversation about how in this whole Civil War dynamic, and this is a super popular alternate history thing in the U.S., is what if the Confederacy won? Tons of stuff. Like, even in Canada, there was a documentary, like a fake documentary they did about like what if the U.S. and the Confederate States of America had become their own things, and that just like goes way beyond just like the levels of stupidity and absurdity that you can go with if you just make guesswork out of history, or assume that everything post that goes on its course. There's an author, and he's a Michigan guy, Harry Turtledove. My dad was a huge Harry Turtledove fan, and what he used to be known for, I don't know if he still does them. I know he lives in the area and still writes. But one of the things he was most known for was his alternate history. Oh, crap. I don't know that I took a blank picture. Hang on one second. Just got to look at these. Get so carried away here. Damn. But he was or is very well known for his alternate history books. My dad had a whole bunch of them, and crap. Okay, I'm going to do some counting real quick here, so apologies. I'm going to be distracted for just a second. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 16, 17, 18, 19, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 30, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. There should be like 33 in each of these. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 29. Okay, so I like just started. 29, 30, 31, 32, 33. Let's look and see what we got here. Yeah, okay. Whew. Okay, glad I caught that. So when I make mistakes like that, what I have to do is take the picture that I didn't put the blank on to divide these up, because otherwise it just turns into a hodgepodge and a mess. I take that picture and I set it off to the side so that when I do go and look at them and organize them and all that, I'll be able to tell where I goofed up. Yeah, so Harry Turtledove was really into these counterfactual alternate history stories, and my dad loved that kind of stuff. I think he loved the exercise. I don't know. Personally, I know he was like a historian and like a professional-ish one at that, but I feel as though he looked at it without too much of a critical eye, because in this particular set of stories that Harry Turtledove wrote, the Civil War is like the key, the turning point. The South wins, and it becomes its own state, like its own country and everything. But then history continues on pretty normal. Like major world events still happen the way that they did, as though they were just inevitable. Assuming that if this particular puzzle piece was changed or altered in some way, that everything else was going to fall into exactly the same place that it did, which doesn't seem like it'd be the case. In his books, I recall from my father that like South wins, it becomes its own country. North and South are opposite one another. The South allies itself with the Allied powers in, or no, what are they called? I can't remember what they're called in World War One. The guys who we call the good guys, Britain and France and Russia, against the Central powers, which were Germany and some other ones, whatever. But the South allies itself with England very much in the way that they were trying to during the Civil War, and then the North allies itself with the Central Powers, and yet nothing really comes out of this particularly differently because World War II still happens, and if you're gonna go counterfactual, go all the way. Like you got to totally change the game, and try to like imagine on like a big picture history scale how things are going to change. It's really interesting exercise history wise, but also just nearly impossible to really fathom. Like if somebody in a history class asks like, what would have happened if this didn't happen? It's like, honestly, it seems almost impossible to tell. There's some general things that probably would happen, but you never know. There's elements that can just come out of the woodwork and it's like, whoa, where did that come from? Alternate universes themselves, though. My girlfriend and I had a cosmology class, which was one of the most comically bad things in the world. That was at the community college that we both went to, and I absolutely adore. Highly recommend community colleges if you haven't gone to college yet and you're looking to do college stuff. If you're already out of college and you're looking to learn some more still and enjoy that structure, community college is definitely the way to go. At least in my experience, which is undoubtedly biased. We took a cosmology class where our prof was a astronomy guy, super critical of the idea of alternate universes, parallel universes. And he really took issue with Michio Kaku, which we've all probably seen him on the internet and on documentaries and that sort of thing, where he talks about like each decision that we make, it like splits things in two, and then subsequently everything splits in two to the point where there's just this infinitesimal amount of alternate universes out there. It's too hard to fathom. Not only is it too hard to fathom, I kind of get where my prof was coming from, or where our prof was coming from, that so many things are actions. Where a particular atom goes in a space as opposed to a different space, like there's so many things to try and imagine that it's too massive. There's too many changes at like a molecular level. There's too many things that could be different or respond differently in his mind for there to be parallel universes. In my mind, for there to be parallel universes that we could even fathom. I feel as though at that point it almost becomes a pointless exercise thinking about parallel universes, because there's just so many minute variations. Like there could be an alternate universe in this exercise where for some reason we're all green, and that we're all Shrek basically, and that the green pigment in our skin helps our skin photosynthesize or something, and as a result all mammals have green skin for some reason. It's like there could be that version, and then everything else is exactly the same. But there could be a version where everything's exactly the same and we're green and nothing can hear, and then it's like, so it's just world that's totally silent to the things that live in it. I don't know, it's too hard for me to fathom because I'm not much of a science guy. So but yeah, that's a good topic too. If you've never seen it, I'm not a huge Family Guy guy, but they did an episode a while ago where they went through some alternate universes. A lot of problems with it, of course. I mean, just structurally, it's a difficult thing to try and tackle, especially with comedy. But there was one that they did where they went to a universe where everything was drawn by Disney. And oh, was that funny. When people try to animate, that's just like an amazing amount of dedication, it seems like. Gee, what else should we talk about? I was thinking I'd probably go until I'm done with all these cartridges that I had. At this point, I'm a little past half of a third of this last one. You can probably see, yeah, it's here. Just this mounting swell of all the garbage or future garbage. I talk about video games more, but I gotta be totally honest. I really haven't been playing video games during this whole stay-at-home quarantine and everything. I keep when stuff like that that is purely recreational, and even though I know it's fun. Uh-oh. So this will happen on occasion, where the box freezes up. We have been taking a lot of pictures, so I'm just going to unplug it after I try to hold the power button for a second. Thankfully, it doesn't like lose any of the data or anything. I can feel this is kind of hot. Let's just switch it around here. Here we go. But yeah, I whenever I am tempted to do something that's purely recreational, like read for personal enjoyment or watch movies on my own or play video games, that kind of stuff. Just gonna check and see how the battery is doing. Yeah, it looks like it's doing okay. But whenever I feel like I have time to do that, my brain seems to instinctually, at least at this point, instinctually tell me, well, if you got the time to do that, you should really be doing something pertaining to your homework or something productive. Even if it's productive and it's not getting me further in education, like family history projects, like this sort of thing. So, yeah, I haven't been doing a lot of video games. A parallel universe where everybody's Isabella. Now, there's a consideration as I'm looking at the chat with Photogen or Photolol. Sorry, Photolol. But yeah, again, it's just such a beautiful possibility that I don't know if I want to imagine it. I don't know if I want to imagine a world where I get to be a little Isabella going. It's just too sweet. It's just too sugary sweet. You ever have that happen where you're watching something, you're listening to something, and it's just too cute? And it's not too cute to the point where you're just like, oh. It's too cute to the point where you're like, oh, it's making my teeth hurt. It's never happened to me before. Okay, I lie. It's happened a couple times. Let's see. I talk about what I'm looking at right now. You'd think I'm looking at the slides, and yet I'm not. I'm looking at a VHS tape. Now, it's an old school one. Talking 90s here. And we're going to play a little game. I don't know if you guys ever listened to Pillow Talk on 100.3 WNIC. No. Good guess, but no. Again, I wouldn't let him in here. So in the Pillow Talk program that WNIC used to have, because the guy died a while ago. He would do this thing around Christmas time where, and he talked in like this smooth, sultry voice, just as though he was laying upon your pillow. You guys had just made love, and now you were spending the evening whispering sweet nothings into your ears, one another's ears. But he would do this thing where he'd call somebody or pick up a line, and he'd be like, "I'm looking at an ornament on the tree in our office. If you can tell me what color that ornament is, I will give you such and such certificate to whatever." Unfortunately, I don't have anything to give. Maybe a shout out like that is worth absolutely anything. You know what? I'll put something goofy on the table. I'll put something. Here's what you'll do. If you guess what VHS tape I'm looking at, we'll do 3 VHS tapes. If you guess what VHS tape I'm looking at, and I'll give you some clues. And you guess correctly, I will put, to the best of my ability, something like in this space that you put into the message thing. Like you say, put that there. This is just an example, just because I'm seeing it right now. Put a Viking here. And it's like, oh yeah, I've got a couple different things that are Viking, and I could put a Viking there. You can come up with anything you want, and then it's up to me to try and satisfy the challenge on your end. So it's a challenge for a challenge. All right, challenge for challenge time, guys. Are you ready for this? Okay. I'm looking at a VHS tape. Believe it came out in the early 90s. It's a kids movie. And let's see, what's the next hint I could give you without just like straight up giving it away? The title begins. But here we go. No, here we go. This is a better clue. I'll give you 3 guesses per one too. So I'm really just giving you an excuse to have me put something here. It's 4 letters. The name of the movie that I'm looking at. Oops. While you're guessing, I'm gonna figure out if I took that picture. No guesses so far? All right, I'll give you clue number 2. The vowels in this name are A and E. Mind is blank, huh? Blank is a pretty good attempt at an answer, but that's 5 letters. So I'll let that guess slide. Let's see. I'm going to describe the plot of the movie, but I'm going to drastically change an element through the film. So if you've seen the film and you're familiar with like the inner workings of the film, I think you will be able to get it. If not, who knows? So there's this man, and it's a movie about his life from infancy to his coming of age as an adult and finding his purpose in life. It opens in this like super dystopian world where he is like sucking on his mother's breast in this like dark and dingy factory, and it's kind of like a Soylent Green scenario. The people, there's a type of people that are being bred to be eaten. And so this particular guy, he's like a little tiny, he's the runt of his family. Because, humans only have 2 breasts. And if you have a lot of kids, it's hard to feed them all. If you've got like twins or triplets. The mom is taken away, presumably to go get eaten, killed, whatever. And in the end, her story is not important. Now, our hero is very sad about this, and he speaks words for the first time, even though he's like an infant. And then this like machine comes down, and it's got little milk nipples on it, and they his siblings just go on feeding mindlessly, but he thinks about it. He thinks about how sad he is that his mother's gone. Now, through circumstance, he ends up in a fair, and Babel. No, it is not Babel. So guess one out of the way. Remember, I changed a significant element to this whole thing. I'm telling you a story that is not an actual movie. There's something that changed in the whole thing. Oh yeah, you nailed it. You nailed it. Wow. Look at that. I think you might have even said, yeah, you said it the first time. My bad. The glare on the text is yeah. So for those who can't see the chat box, it is Babe. The movie is Babe. Absolutely superb movie. All right, VHS number 2. And for each one that you get right, I'll put something else weird on here. So there could be multiple weird things here. Okay, it's just an energy mode. All right, we may be running kind of close here because I do not have my plug to my computer here. Actually, I'll grab that real quick just so I can do this a little bit longer. Just plug that in. I think it might be down here, but if not, it is not. I'll be back. I think I'm going to get this. Oh, that's right. There's a triple plug. I don't know why I thought I could do this without plugging in my computer, but you live and learn. Again, with the Crush 40 reference, I'm clearly addicted. Clearly have a problem. Okay. Yeah, we're almost there, guys. Hey, Bertha died. Oh, yeah. Yeah, sad news, guys. My buddy Bertha, light of my life. She died. It's pretty tragic. It's an interesting way for her to want to reveal her name to the world that is the internet. But yeah, my girlfriend's name's Bertha. It is sad. So VHS number 2. Also about a pig. So there's a huge hint there. Actually, in all honesty, this one might be kind of hard to get. Also based on pigs, except these pigs wear clothes. These pigs wear clothes, and they speak with British accents. And and it's a cartoon. Those are a whole bunch of hints right there. I'm just slew of hints. I'm fairly certain this is a pretty uncommon thing from my childhood. Any guesses? That's a good guess. That's a good guess, but that one's about rabbits, and they don't wear clothes. They don't wear clothes in that. That time, I guess maybe I'll give that one as a pass because I did not stipulate. I was not changing any fact about what I was telling you. That's like my ultimate hint is I'll tell you the plot of the movie and change a thing. So no, this one is actually about pigs that wear clothes. And they sing a song called Tom Tom the Piper's Son Stole a Pig and Away He Run. There's also people. There's also people in this one. Yeah, who knows? Maybe this one might be a little too hard. No clue, huh? Yeah, this one might be a bit too obscure. So, if you're familiar with Beatrix Potter, she was a children's author in England. But interestingly enough, is not as well known for that in England as she is for her contributions to the field of mycology, which is the study of fungi. She's a noted botanist in that respect. But no, she also wrote kids' books, and they were very beautifully illustrated, all these little watercolors. The thing she's most known for is Peter Rabbit. Made an absolutely horrible version of it recently. But they did these delightful animated, and they're animated like so beautifully, like these little watercolor paintings basically that you're looking at. Yeah, she did one that was about a story, the tale of Pigling Bland, where that poor little pig has lost his papers. And I never understood what that meant when I was a kid. What does it mean to lose your papers? Because they get the main character, Pigling Bland, and his brother Tommy, I think. It's been a while. Alexander. That was his brother's name. They're sent away by their mother to market for some reason, but these are anthropomorphic pigs. So I don't know why they're going to market. I think they were picking something up for her. But she insisted that they had to have these papers. And if they didn't have these papers and a watchman was on the road and they didn't have them, they'd get taken away and sold for meat or something. It was like, that is, as an adult, that's mortifying, but they really played it kind of lighthearted in the thing. It was never really scary. But there's all these humans just wandering around with these anthropomorphic pigs in their lives. And there's this one guy, and he's just so damn creepy, especially when he's animated. But yeah, they lose their papers. Really, it's a story about documentation and being caught unawares without your documentation by an authoritarian government. That is the key to interpreting this children's story. Okay, so that one I'll give. But unfortunately, that limits my VHS guesses for you guys. So this next one, Bertha's probably going to know this one. It's not even one VHS. It's four. It's 4 VHS tapes. It's a documentary, and it's narrated, hosted by the best guy out of the Monty Python crew. Objectively, the funniest of them all, and the most skilled of them all. And unfortunately, he died recently. That was very sad. recently last year, so not a victim of the pandemic that's sweeping across the world, but victim of dementia. Wow, I'm looking at this picture here while I'm making a digital copy of it, and this dog looks just like my girlfriend's dog. It's remarkable. It looks just like Bertha's dog. Let's see. No guesses, huh? Okay, Bertha, I'm a little disappointed. It's about people from one place moving to try and take over another place. And they tried to do this for like hundreds of years. It was a very long time ago. Dead silence. I guess Bertha doesn't want to participate. That's totally fine. Let's see. We can go with a different one. Except I got to be totally honest. My VHS collection, as I look at it, is a little too obscure. I'll just tell you what's on here, and no, Bertha, you're not going to ruin the game. If you win what if you win with your guess, you get to tell me to put. I think you joined late to the party, so if you tell me what VHS tape I'm looking at, your reward is that you get to ask me to put something weird on here, and you just tell me anything, and I have to try and find the closest thing I can to that to be able to put on. The example that I gave was a Viking and trying to find a Viking to put here so that you guys all get to enjoy a little Viking. But I could probably think of another example. A cactus. Told me to put a cactus up here. I could try and find a cactus. So if you know the answer, Gesundheit. Oh yeah, you won. Photo. You get Photolol. You get to tell me what to put on here. That's already a given. I was just checking to see if you got to put more things. If you want to give me a thing, I'll put that on next time. So that way it gives me a couple days to find something. Oh, you want me to put a cat on here? I see what you're doing. I actually think I have a cat here. No, I don't. But yeah, so the other films that are on here, because some of them I just know for a fact nobody's going to guess except for Bertha, are a film by Jean-Pierre Jeunet called Delicatessen, which was pretty good the one time I saw it, but I haven't seen it since. This was a gift from a coworker who had a pristine copy on VHS, which I don't know that I've ever seen a pristine VHS. So who knows? It might play so damn smooth. And then I have Fabio's A Time for Romance, because every person who owns a VHS collection needs to have that VHS. And Fabio should have been the star of a movie. That's not even just my opinion, that's fact. And then after that, I have 3 VHSs of the Star Wars movies before they put those onto DVD, because I know that the DVD releases have a lot of editing done to them that is George Lucas's mind, the superior edit of the films. But I'd rather see them how I remember seeing them, which was on VHS tapes. See, I'm trying to think if there's any games or hey Bertha, you got anything you want me to talk about? Photogan Photolol. God, why do I keep saying Photogan? Photolol gave me a couple things to talk about. What about you? What would you like to hear about? Oh, and Photolol, you were right. Yeah, it is the Crusades. So you get to have another thing. Photolol, what else do you want? What else do you want sitting right here? Huh. You want me sitting here? How can I not read what that says? Oh, that just says yeah, ha 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 ha. Castle. Ooh, I like that one. I like that one. That I can do. Definitely. I've already got it in my mind. Bertha, what do you want me to talk about, man? I'm waiting. I'm waiting, Bertha, baby. Don't make me give Bertha to sorrow and pain. What shows I've been watching? Okay. So the funny thing is, the last stream that I did on Instagram, I was cut off, and I didn't realize that I'd been cut off. So I don't remember if I talked about some things already, but I could just talk about them anywho, because I've been watching too much in the way of shows. I watched Barakamon, which was a great chill anime with my mom. Like actually watched it. I only ever seen the first episode. Oh my god, is it freezing again? Oh, it's froze again. I think I'm overheating this thing. So I think I'm just gonna finish up this stack, and then it'll leave me one more stack that I'll pick up tomorrow. It's only 30 slides or so, and then the next time that I do one of these on Wednesday, we'll have like the whole thing. Or I could try and push it. I think I might try and push it. Just get them all done. But yeah, so Barakamon was pretty great. And I loaned my copy to Bertha, and I'm hoping Bertha's enjoying it. I've heard Bertha's enjoying it, but it seems like it'd be hard not to. It's pretty chill in the most relaxing of ways. Aside from that, I'm sitting here racking my brain, and I actually nothing is coming to mind in terms of show. I don't know that I've watched any shows recently, like during COVID. I have there's some shows that I finally got around to. One I got around to finishing thanks to Bertha, and then two ones that we just like started and took a little bit further than my initial view. So one that we finished that I'd only ever seen like a lot of, but I'd never seen the whole thing was Avatar, which that's just a great show. Very much like upper echelons of American animation, even though it was animated in South Korea. But yeah, it's a great show. I feel like older young adults, like people in their early 20s and stuff, can really have an appreciation for it that is seemingly lost on younger people, but whatever. And then Bertha and I started watching The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., starring the one and only Bruce Campbell, just an acting legend. But really, the breakout star for myself, at least, and Bertha as well. I feel like Bertha really addressed it first. Has been Julius Carry as his companion, but really his buddy, Lord Bowler. Just does a superb job with that character. Sometimes Bruce Campbell is just playing Bruce Campbell. I feel like Julius Carry is acting. And sometimes the shows are real hit or miss. The beginning was pretty solid for myself. I feel like it had a clear idea what it wanted to do, which was this guy, like his father was killed by all these outlaws. And so he was going to go out and get the outlaws who escaped justice from his father. There was like a weird semi-mystical element with this orb. What about the orb? Which is one of the most common questions in the whole show. Probably right there with what's going on. It's always just about them wandering into circumstances and stuff. Or so it was until the point where we got, which involved a lot of these characters. It's set in the West, Wild West in the 1890s. But there were like time travelers. The bad guy was from the future, like thousands of years in the future. It started getting weird. There was an episode with motorcycles that just sucked so bad. There was an episode with Elvis. It's like, what the hell is Elvis doing in like cowboy times? Ugh. But we're planning on finishing it. We're like decently through it. So those have been the things that we watched recently. But those have all been kind of put on hiatus because Bertha and I are in our respective families' homes. Yeah, but when I truly feel like I can just glut myself on watching things, probably watch a whole lot more in terms of shows and stuff like that. But yeah, that was a good topic. Bertha Bay. Bertha Wertha. All right, here's another game I got for you guys. I believe I'm looking at all the cacti that are in this room. I'm going to set them on the table right now. How many cacti do you think I am going to put on the table? Full disclosure, it is going to be all of the cacti in this room. So what I'm looking for is guesses that are close to the real answer. Doesn't have to be the real answer, but if it is, whoa, I don't know. I don't know what I'll do. You can have me do anything you want. All right, Photogen or Photolol saying 3 cacti. And if I hear maybe like one more guesstimate, but maybe not, give it like 3 more slides. I will reveal to ye all the cacti that are in this room. I think this is a picture of a kid playing an old fatback computer with like a DOS game. It was absolutely insane. Talk about the past, man. Seven. Whoa. Photolol, why'd you change your number? Oh, 5. Which one am I supposed to go with, Photolol? I have to hold you accountable for one of your numbers. I'm going to go with your first number. All right. I'm going to go grab the cacti. There's one cacti. Well, there's two cacti. Oh, man. No, it was two cacti. It was two cacti. But hey, Photogun, Photolol was the closest because my sultry lass Bertha did not reply. Bertha, is it okay if I call you Buxom Bertha? So Photolol, I didn't specify what it was that you got as an award. So honestly, you can have whatever you want. I don't know what stipulation to put on there. So you go for it. I can't call you Buxom Bertha. Okay. How about beautiful Bertha? Cat. Okay. Well, I'm almost done with these pictures, and as a concluding, like, final little thing, I'll show you that damn cat. Pinkerton will make his web debut. Well, I guess it's not his web debut. He's actually in a couple places on the internet. I can call you beautiful Bertha. Beautiful. Beautiful Bertha. What's the dumbest sport, in your opinion? I ask because I'm looking at pictures of golf right now. No relation. Definitely no reason I'm asking. Because the answer is golf. It's not a sport. And if you sweat when you're playing golf, you feel like you're working out, that just means you're overweight. That just means you're out of shape. That's really what that means. No shaming here. It just means you are incredibly out of shape. That swinging a club gets you. Boy, oh, do these people in these pictures love golf. Lots and lots of golf. I'm really hoping Bertha's dad was insisting that he was going to go golfing. I think yesterday, which is just the stupidest thing. He was going to go out of town, out of state to go golfing. It's like, oh, geez, please don't do that. I'm hoping he didn't. From how I heard it, sounded like he didn't. But I don't know. I forgot to ask. But you know what golf has that no other sport has? And it does kind of make it more like just a leisure activity. Maybe a game as opposed to a sport. It's golf carts. I love me some golf carts. And I would love to have a solar powered golf cart. That could be my primary mode of transportation. I'd do it. But I live in a place that's not very conducive to that. All right, guys, I have made it. That was just a little under 300 photos now made into digital copies. We did good work here today. I am going to go grab that cat. And with that, we'll conclude this Friday chat. I will pick it up again on Wednesday, and hopefully there's enough of a gap between now and Wednesday where stuff has happened that I can, I don't know, be more interesting or just be plateau of interest. And then we'll pick it up again on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, and then we'll do the same thing that Friday, which I'm kind of confused why I chose Wednesday and Friday, but all right, I'm going to go grab the Pinkerton. Oh, thank you. Hey ho, Pinky boy. Hey, Pinky. Say something to all your fans out there. Nothing? You got nothing? Just purrs? Okay. Well, that's Pinky. So I will bid you guys adieu. Ta-ta.